Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And even if the value of the Canadian dollar to the US dollar stayed at the exact same percentage as it was 5 years ago, it would have still lost a significant amount of value. People don't seem to understand how much all fiat currencies in the world are losing value, and the Canadian dollar, there's a lot of hype about it. Recently, they were saying it was hitting all-time highs, and as we went into here at WAM, it's not that it was hitting highs, or it's not that it was growing in value, it was that the US dollar was losing a significant amount of value, which in comparison made the Canadian dollar look like it gained value. But in reality, it's losing value. You compare it to the price of living, etc. It's quite obvious. But this post from the Globe and Mail, this article here says, Canadian dollar retreats from 6-week high ahead of Bank of Canada rate decision. And as the article goes on to say, the Canadian dollar pulled back from a 6-week high against its broadly firmer U.S. counterpart on Tuesday as investors weighed a rebound in the country's exports before turning attention to a Bank of Canada interest rate decision on Wednesday. At 4 p.m. Eastern, the Canadian dollar was trading at $1.2698 to the greenback, or 78.75 US cents, down 0.2%. It touched its strongest intraday since October 24th at $1.2624. In quotations, we are moving into event risk such as the Bank of Canada interest rate decision tomorrow, said Jeff Scott, senior currency strategist at OFX. Maybe people don't want to be holding onto Canadian dollars. Canada's trade deficit narrowed to $1.47 billion in October from a revised $3.36 billion in September as exports increased after 4 consecutive monthly declines. Economists had forecast a deficit of $2.7 billion. And it goes on and on. It's the usual stuff that's kind of mumbo jumbo to the average person. So we wanted to just kind of go into this and explain, not the volatility as much as the vast manipulation of fiat currencies, the quantitative easing, the creation out of thin air, the debt-based system that is the fiat currency. So all fiat currencies eventually revert to their intrinsic value of zero. They always have, they always will, going back to 1024 AD in China. And things don't change, folks. People don't learn, but things don't change. The same fundamentals apply. However, in the monetary system, it's tricky getting a handle of those fundamentals because they're usually off the table due to the level of manipulation in the monetary system. So you can't really put your finger on this is the day it's going to collapse. You just know it's going to collapse. Of course, yeah. So we are heading towards a massive crash. These interest rates are futile. John, can you go into this vast manipulation and how the Canadian dollar is really performing?
Well, what we really should talk about is currency wars, because that's what it is. It's a circle of currency wars and trade wars around the world where they constantly fight each other to devalue their currency against their opponents that they're trading with. For example, South Korea fights always with Japan. That's a massive one. And then US and Canada always fights with each other. China. A lot of Scandinavian ones fights with each other. And then, of course, China fights with everybody else. Because that's where everybody's producing most of their electronics, first of all. I'm just going to show you how crazy these fluctuations have been lately between the US dollar and Canadian dollar. This is US dollar to Canadian. In 2013, on February the 2nd, it was 0.98, the Canadian dollar. So it was actually very strong at that point. And then, of course, at the peak, it was about 143, 145. And that was in 2016 in January. And then that's only a year ago. Now it's been declining again.
2 years, yeah.
Yeah, 2 years. Yeah, people have sentiment that, the Canadian dollar is getting stronger. What it really is just the Canadian dollar is trying to... Well, actually, no, sorry. It's the Americans with Trump trying to devalue their dollar, so they become stronger because he has said himself that he wants the Americans to be, a strong economy starting to trade with others.
He does a lot of talk. I want to make a very clear point here that Trump doesn't have any handle over the U.S. economy. It's a Federal Reserve. Presidents have no say. Presidents have very little say. Just like in Canada, it's not like Trudeau is crashing the dollar. He is a henchman. He's a guy who comes out and talks with the nice hair. there.
He's not a
that he
puppet,
could even
he's a
talk.
Muppet.
Yeah, it's not like he can even talk. Yeah, he's not a puppet, he's a Muppet. Yeah, sure. The point is, he's too stupid to tie his own shoes. I doubt he's going to crash the economy. The economy is powered by the central bankers, the central banking cartels throughout the world, and has nothing to do with the prime ministers or presidents. However, the prime ministers and presidents are the good puppets that go out and say what they're told to say, read the teleprompters, and everyone believes that they're the one that's doing all the work, as if one person is like doing magic and making things happen. It's these bureaucratic, deep state operatives, these central banking operatives, these banking operatives in general, and it's going on throughout the world. But the Canadian dollar, we did a report in January 2016 where you showed that peak, and it's interesting because we've spoken about it at the time. We made a comment. We kind of made an analogy, I guess you could say, that the Canadian dollar is going to drop to 5 cents to the U.S. dollar, or 5 cents in general. But our point wasn't that it's literally going to do that. Our point was a metaphor for the fact that it's going to revert to zero. People were freaking out at the time, saying it's going to go to 60 cents, etc., etc. No, it's going to go to zero eventually. People can just say 60 cents, 65 cents, 70 cents.
Yeah.
It's going to drop.
Well, it would be at zero, but it'll look like it's better because it's like versus other currencies, it's fine. But when you go and look at real things, commodities and everything else,
tangible assets,
it will be worthless compared to it. So that's where you got to take a look. Like, take a look at all these prices, constantly going up, and the cost of living always going up. Well, it's the reason for it. It's because of the constant inflation of the currency, the constant more and more money that's circulating into the money supply. And this is not new. It's happened throughout decades. Centuries around the world, where constantly people have been fighting with each other. It used to be gold that used to be the backing, and then some people went off the gold standard.
Backing should be also in quotations, because of course they printed out way more paper than they actually had gold, which created the debt. And
they had backing, but always a problem. Even looking back at the Sung Dynasty, they had coinage as backing, but then they started to, of course, debase their coinage, and then they started to print more IOU notes. So you can never trust the government to not devalue their currency in order to profit themselves. They always do. And Josh, you got a $20.
Well, this is like monopoly money. This is the Canadian $20 bill for those that aren't in Canada that don't recognize it. It's basically monopoly money. We have other ones here. It's the $5 bill. It's again monopoly money. We've got a $10 bill here, monopoly money, and it's all an absolute joke because it has the 5 on it, it has a 10, it has a 20. Well, these are just polymer notes. They are IOUs. They aren't real money. They're currency, but they're not real money, and they have no store of value. And that by store of value, I mean they are just printed into oblivion. They have no cap on the scarcity. There's no scarcity to it, which brings value to things like gold and silver, which brings value to things like Bitcoin. It has absolutely no value to it, and it's just out of control printing, and it doesn't mean anything. It will eventually revert to its intrinsic value of zero, and people have to understand this so they can prepare themselves and be financially stable, because at the same time as all this is happening, and of course going back to the early 1970s when Pierre Elliott Trudeau brought us away from gold into just full fiat at all times.
It started at 1,023 tons.
And
got zero.
Going from that, I mean, even at that time, it was centrally planned, of course, under gold, more paper than there was gold. But now it's just paper, paper, paper. We're going into a cashless system for the most part in Canada. And you look at the value of the price of living, it's skyrocketed. And at the same time, as we confronted Bill Morneau, the finance minister, back in May 2016, he doesn't believe gold has any real value, which is one of the reasons why he finished the blow coming from the Harper administration going into Trudeau. He finished the blow by selling off all of Canada's gold, except for a little tiny fraction left for just a public showing and a little piece of.
Well, the official number is zero. By the way,
official. So if anything, if the inevitable happens and it all comes crashing down, and it will, we have nothing. We have absolutely nothing. And Venezuela did a very similar thing, but even Venezuela, I believe, has more gold than Canada.
Of course they do. They still have, I think, 150, 200 tons. And any country around the world, actually, it's funny, my home country, Norway and Canada, is one of the few Western countries in the world that doesn't have any gold. They're just crazy not to have it because they always, if you look at cycles, it always comes back to gold.
Leaving us to be just taken over once it all comes crashing down and we owe debts, etc.
And that's what happens to a lot of countries when you have these massive rearrangements. Suddenly they just cover up with a massive war, and then it's just a takeover of the weak countries, the countries that didn't have, the backing of currencies.
So start learning how to speak Cantonese or American. All I know is that one way or another, all these fiat currencies are going to come down like a domino effect. But Canada, it's terrible, and people keep giving it like these bullish speculations when you're looking at a currency that just constantly devalues as the debt just skyrockets at all times.
Well, it's all, everybody is just devaluing everywhere, and it's just a race to zero. Who's going to be the first to end up in a hyperinflation? There's so many currencies. I believe the United States might be one of the first that actually enters into it because they're the world reserve currency, and from that it's just going to topple every single economy because it's always a trust game, and when that trust in the currency's value is broken, it's game over.
Absolutely. So with that said, solutions, as people always want to hear, it's food, water, shelter, defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, though I know a defense isn't as easy to come by in Canada, but there are ways to soundly defend yourself. And going from that, of course, gold, silver, decentralized assets, tangible assets, Bitcoin, off the grid, completely decentralized based on the individual demand and their scarcity, just like gold and silver has scarcity because there's not a lot of it out there, unlike the fiat currencies that are just printed into oblivion.
And make sure you educate yourself. I would suggest, highly suggest you take a look at my books, The End of Freedom, How Our Monetary System Enslaves Us, and Canada, the Greatest Economy in the World, question mark.
Up on Amazon.
Yeah, both of them are available on Amazon because education is key as well. You could prep everything you want, but if you don't understand why you're prepping, then it's worth nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's information. You need that negative. You need to understand the negative in order to make it a positive, in order to prepare yourself, in order to be safe, instead of on your knees begging for guidance from the almighty state and banking system, which will always end terribly. And we've seen that throughout history. So self-sustainability, financial responsibility, because you cannot actually have freedom without responsibility. They go hand in hand, and that's so important.
You got to choose between prosperity and enslavement.
Yeah.
That's the two choices you get, and you just got to choose the right thing.
It's absolutely imperative. So thank you very much for going into this with us, John, and we'll be back with you with much more. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here at WAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized and censored by YouTube as the Anti-Defamation League comes in and flags all of our content as hate speech. You can also find me at Josh Sigurdson at steemit.com. That's steemit.com, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post via Steem, the cryptocurrency. You can also find our Bitcoin address in the description and the comments below, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And don't forget to come on down to Anarchapulco in Acapulco, Mexico in February, one of the best events of the year, and you can save money on your tickets by typing in promo code WAM. That's WAM. We'll leave the link below for you, and until next time, don't forget to subscribe. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.